This day begins as usual. Despite the beautiful weather, it is never calm inside this house. The maid has been busy with her business since the morning. She has already managed to walk around the entire territory and even prepare breakfast. In fact, everything is not as it might seem at first glance. The difficulty of being in this mansion for her is not only that there is a lot of work here. The worst thing is that she had to get used to and come to terms with the terrifying screams a long time ago. There are several rooms near which she is afraid to even pass by. Things happen here that can only be compared to hell. Its master is someone who is very difficult to call a man. He is rather a real monster who never spares anyone or anything. David is so cruel that every day after work he comes up with ways to punish someone next time, and each time these options are worse than the previous ones. It so happened that the owner of the house today left that very room at the moment when the maid was passing nearby. Every time she sees him, the woman begins to pray. If only he was in a good mood. As you know, the lives of even those whom he does not know or random passers-by depend on this. Passing by him, there is a feeling as if she is now either very lucky or she will find herself in the place of that screaming person in the room even for no reason. Sometimes she has thoughts about why she even stays working in this place. But at the same time, a very simple answer appears. It is better not to take risks and not upset this person with such news. So she's been working here for several years in dreams of what will happen miracle, and he fired her himself. This time she managed to pass by. She deliberately did not look him in the eyes and did nothing that could stop him or displease him. The girl even learned to walk so as not to make any sounds. This helped her a lot more than once. Now she is scheduled to bring breakfast to one person, whom she is afraid to even go into the room of, because after everything that he has been through, it is a little dangerous to be near. Every time she thinks that the guy can take advantage of the situation, hit her and run away, but since she simply has no choice, she has to do it no matter what. Now she takes out the keys, adjusts herself, and tries to calm down as much as possible. Since this door is always locked, she always has the keys with her, which under no circumstances should fall into the hands of this man. This was the order of the owner of the house. The girl came into the room and warned that it was her. In fact, in spite of everything, she was very sorry for this guy, because she didn't even know what he did to deserve such a terrible attitude towards himself. He is forced to be in this closed room, and today he has no understanding of whether he will ever be released anywhere. It turns out that on the one hand, she is very afraid of him, but on the other, she is very sorry that his life has turned into a real hell, and this life is now controlled by the monster who is the owner of the house. When the maid saw him in a calm mood, she was not afraid and came closer. The girl wished him a pleasant appetite and, of course, patience. Since the master does not allow him to cook something special, she has to secretly make the simplest food at least a little tasty, satisfying, and useful. And that's not all. She has one secret that only she and he know about. The maid adds painkillers to the food to make him feel at least a little easier. The guy thanks for this, because if it weren't for the help, he wouldn't have lasted so long. Under the guise of ordinary water, he drinks a medicine that allows him to withstand this terrible torment, after which he miraculously remains alive, so that no one suspects anything. Despite this help, she has to talk to him as if he was very guilty, and she treats him just as bad as everyone else. After that, she said that if he needed anything else, she would try to think of something, and in every possible way, make his stay in this place easier. In fact, he no longer even knows how to react to this and what he can ask for. His thoughts are only about one thing, that soon the master will come again, and he will have to endure unbearable pain for at least 2 hours. This time, she again reminded him that he should not tell the master anything, otherwise the two of them would be punished. In response, the guy begins to be indignant because he has already said more than once that he understands everything perfectly and does not need to be repeated to him every time same thing. The girl only smiled for a second and said that she would try to remind her not so often, and then explained that she was just very afraid and did not want to end up in this place. She gave him a little more food to drink, although he is supposed to have no more than half a glass a day. But since no one is around, of course, they take advantage of this opportunity. Since the quantity and volume of food and water is so small that if she did not bring him additional portions, everything would be very sad. And so that he wouldn't strain himself at all, the maid offered to peel even boiled eggs for him. She tried to do it as quickly as possible so that no one would see or think that they were here together, and someone was helping someone. But at this moment, No one even realizes that, in fact, the owner has learned not only to be the most cruel, he also knows how to walk as silently as the assistant. He approached this room very quietly, and fortunately nothing was heard outside the door, so they were very lucky. It turns out that by some miracle the guy heard these sounds and said that he felt the presence of a monster, and then began to say that now he was definitely finished, as if he felt his death, and began to cry very much. At first the girl didn't understand anything, but as soon as the owner entered the room, everything became clear. She turned in his direction and said that everything was fine. She just wanted to pick up the dirty bed linen. Since usually the maid is already busy with some other business, the owner asked what she was doing here, since it doesn't take that much time to bring breakfast. He asked this question as if he suspected something. The girl tried to pretend that nothing had happened, greeted him and said that she was already planning to leave, and that she herself did not know why this happened, when suddenly he asked a very strange question. Was she here alone, or someone else came with her? The maid replied that there was no one here except her, and she did not understand why he asks this question. The owner replied that he knew this, and said that she herself could understand that this was not the essence of this question at all. In fact, she has no idea what this means and what he means. The girl is tired of these mysterious phrases and no longer even tries to figure it out on her own. He suddenly starts talking to his assistants and, as usual, communicates in mysterious words so that no one else understands the essence of the words. Everything is as usual, very secret. After that, the guy took some long object and wanted to check the bed linen because he suspected that she might be hiding something there. He checked everything he wanted but still didn't stop. After that, he had a question. Why did she come here completely alone? Supposedly it could be dangerous here. The girl immediately thought that this was very strange, because it was really dangerous in this house can only be when he is nearby. Everyone else here is absolutely safe, naturally. She didn't answer him this out loud, but just thought. In order to somehow justify herself and answer his question, she came up with something to say. Namely, that she was simply following Mrs. April's orders and did not think that there would be any problem with it. In response, he simply looked at her with a surprised look. But judging by this reaction, as usual, it is unknown what can be expected from this person. When suddenly, he takes that object again and asks how, in their opinion, should he punish the person who disobeyed his order. Only, it's very strange that first of all he approached his assistant, with whom he came. The man does not understand what this means, and is even afraid to ask what he did wrong. It turns out that the owner is unhappy that his assistants do not control the situation and allow themselves to leave the maid alone with this person. The girl has a lot of thoughts about this, but of course, it would be better and safer to remain silent. The assistant promised that this would never happen again and that he would always keep an eye on it. The maid looks at this assistant and doesn't understand how he deserved such an attitude, because he didn't even do anything wrong. In fact, no one understands what he is up to, but since everyone knows what kind of person he is, nothing good can be expected from him. At some point, he decided to make sure that the assistant never forgot again and remembered this situation forever. In his opinion, doing this with words would be useless. Therefore, the owner used force. In fact, as usual, he didn't understand whether the person was guilty or not, how cruel it was, and didn't see the situation from the outside at all. It was very unfair. Therefore, at the last moment, the girl drew his attention to herself and distracted him from his assistant. The maid apologized and said that it was all her fault. Therefore, she asked not to punish the assistant and to resolve this matter with her, because it would be fair. She says that she takes the punishment upon herself and is ready to answer for her action. The girl does not even approximately understand what she might experience now, but for the sake of justice, she still decided to do it and began to cry in advance. Before, she was scared to even look in his direction, but now she attracts attention to herself, and all for the sake of justice. The guy clearly didn't expect something like that from her, so it's very interesting how he will react to this. There was a similar situation once before and 2 people were injured, so it is possible that this only made it worse. As soon as he began to approach in this direction, she realized that there was no turning back. Since she had decided to do this, she would have to endure and be responsible for her words. As soon as he began to approach her with that heavy object, she could barely restrain herself so that someone would not run away, when suddenly she saw that the owner was starting to take something out of his pocket. And this is just an ordinary handkerchief with which he wanted to wipe away her tears. The maid was ready to feel anything, but not this. She does not understand what this means and never ceases to be surprised because he really treats her somehow differently. Special. He was just ready to punish the assistant and suddenly he spared her. And that's not all. He begins to look at her with such eyes, as if he plans not to punish. But on the contrary, he wants to calm her down and ask her to stop crying, which is very unlike him. Then he asked me for something, namely, don't bring food here anymore, because it's enough to just leave it on the street and someone else will do it for it. The girl replied that she understood everything and promised that she would not come here again, especially without the accompaniment of one of the staff. She looked to the side and tried to understand the situation, because everything was so strange and unexpected that it seemed that there must be a catch somewhere. She knows him as a completely different person, and the fact that he just offered her a handkerchief and even wiped away a tear himself is truly surprising and makes her even more wary. When suddenly he abruptly takes her hand and at the same time does not say anything. The girl is already so afraid of making unnecessary movements that she tries not to even move or make any sounds. As soon as she begins to look into his eyes, she feels as if he can read her thoughts and has long guessed about all her secrets that she carefully hid all this time. None of those present understands when all this will end and when it will be possible to go somewhere to mind their own business and not be in his presence. What worries her most is this strange look, which at the same time calms her down because it seems very kind. But on the other hand, when a smile appears on his face and such a look, it doesn't mean anything good. Meanwhile, the next day began. The owner again did not sleep at night and thought what else to come up with to punish that person more severely. This time the maid listened to the owner and did not enter the door. She stopped near it and again thought about what the master's behavior yesterday meant. She does not understand why he is very cruel to others and can punish even without reason, but forgives her even then when she's really at fault. Tonight she had a dream, as if she was working at another job, feeling great and forgot that she was once here. She of course really wants to talk to him about this topic, but at the same time, it's very scary because the reaction can be completely different. If he takes this to mean that she supposedly doesn't like it here, although this is true, he may become very angry and lock her in the next room. When she was allowed to come in, she looked at this guy and was even afraid to imagine how much he still had to endure. She had no idea what he was thinking about and how much he wanted to escape from here. He has a look as if it is no longer possible to scare him. He is used to something that is not even in horror films. His life is like a real hell. He said more than once that there is nothing that could be worse than this. If you look at his look, you can immediately see what he went through. Only today they are starting to take him out somewhere, and if the girl heard everything correctly, today he will go somewhere. If only she could do something to help him get free. She would have done it a long time ago. But since there is strict control here, it's dangerous to even think about it. When suddenly, the owner approached her again very quietly. It seemed as if he was hinting every time that they had something in common, and he had specially learned to quietly approach anyone. This time he came up to say that they've been seeing each other too much lately. The gentleman doesn't even realize that in fact, the maid would be the happiest if she didn't see him for at least a few days. She's already trying to avoid him, and it's as if he's deliberately very often nearby or just passing by. After that, he suddenly praised her for her good work. Although he had never said anything like that before, this seems like another hint from him. The most terrible thing that she has to realize at this moment is that just now he brought unbearable suffering to that guy. And now to smile as if he is the kindest and most holy person in the world is simply disgusting. The girl tries to think about it, but just can't. It turns out that she never ceases to be amazed at how much his look and appearance differs from what he really is like inside. Of course, the girl thanked him for such words and said that she would try to become even better than she is now, although she is already doing more than she should and has long deserved a vacation, which is pointless to even hope for. As soon as she said that she needed to continue cleaning and that she no longer had time to talk, the gentleman touched her shoulder and asked her to stay, as if he wanted to say something. It turns out that he had been wanting to ask for a long time and still decided to do it right now. The guy asked just one question: why she constantly avoids his eyes and doesn't even look in his direction when talking, as if she was showing disrespect or was offended by something. The maid thought about it because this is a very difficult question, and now she needs to come up with something as quickly as possible to correct the situation and explain her behavior. Instead of looking for any excuses, she looked him in the eyes and said that she had never even noticed this. And in fact, it didn't happen on purpose. She apologized and suggested that if it was important to him, she would try for it track. He clearly didn't expect to hear such an answer. Now it's even more interesting to hear what he has to say to this. The main thing is that the gentleman believes him and that he doesn't have any more questions. He said that it was very important for him and seemed to even believe it. The maid calmed down, relaxed, and stopped being nervous. After that, they immediately said goodbye, since the maid had already said that she had too much to do and did not have time for these conversations. He silently left, and as soon as he stopped looking in her direction, the girl immediately changed her gaze and showed her real emotions. Especially after he touched her, she felt disgusted and wanted to go somewhere far away so as not to meet him anywhere else today. Every time he talks to her or even touches her, the girl has a desire to tell him everything she thinks about him and ask him not to do that again. She can barely restrain herself from thinking about something that she might regret later. And also, when she manages to be alone, the maid often remembers her parents who died several years ago and left her completely alone in this too cruel world. No one thought that this could happen, but fortunately, she had an aunt who always offered her help. She said that if something bad happened, if she didn't have a job, she would be happy to shelter the girl in her house and help her. But she constantly refused because she wanted to prove to herself that she would not be lost and could earn money without anyone's help. She would always like to be independent, and unfortunately, she had to become like that and feel what it was like very early. She didn't need other people's money. She always wanted to earn it herself. But unfortunately, she ended up in a job from which she could no longer get out, no matter how much she wanted it. The girl dreamed of earning a lot of money, buying a huge house, starting a family, and living the remaining time happily with her loved one. But in the end, she found herself locked up with a monster in the same house and has no idea when she will be able to get out of there. If the girl only knew what awaited her in the future, she would never even be in the same city with this man who literally ruined her life. And he was not yet cruel, like with the others. In this regard, she is of course very lucky, but her dream life clearly doesn't look like this. There are no prospects here. There is only horror and constant screams all around. At some point, she begins to come up with some kind of mission for herself, so that being here isn't so boring. It's just convenient to talk about this while working, when no one is around. She managed to find out that from here to some camp can be reached in 5 hours by car, which means that she definitely does not plan to stay here. She made sure that the transport truck had just left and a postal van should arrive soon. Accordingly, she has a lot of time to deliver a letter to one person. She's very good at pretending that she is just cleaning this room, although in fact, her head is already full of thoughts and ideas that will help quickly change her life for the better. The maid is sure that as soon as Justin checks all the letters, he will immediately contact the branch. And the rescue team near the camp must have time to save the guy they really want to help before the transport truck reaches the city. As soon as she collected all the dirty bed linen, she didn't notice how the owner was nearby again. As usual, he happened very unnoticed, and it's very good that she didn't say a single word out loud. The girl heard some sound and was very scared. She even dropped the basket with dirty things to turn around and see who was behind her. And of course, this man turned out to be a gentleman. It seems that he likes to appear very unnoticed and observe the reaction of his assistants. He suddenly came very close and said that she had a very pleasant aroma. This phrase sounded a little ambiguous, which is very alarming. As usual, the maid tries not to show that she's very scared, because as we know from personal experience, this will only make things worse. She remains silent and tries to hold on and remain calm until the last moment. After that, he begins to come closer and closer, as if he wants to hint about something. The girl no longer knows how she has the patience not to turn around and push him far away. She really wants to do this, but it will be safer to just remain silent and be patient for a while. Unless, of course, she is ready for it. At such moments, she begins to blame herself more and more for not trying to escape from this place, so as never to see or hear him again. She worked here for many years, and in fact, she has one dream: to return time back and at least move to another city. She is already ready to work in any conditions, if only it would all stop as soon as possible. After such horror and a hard day at work, It seems that there is no point in enduring this even for a large reward. If she miraculously managed to quit, most likely, he would have never had an assistant. No one needs such work even for nothing. It is not surprising if his other assistants think the same way. Now she has so many thoughts that the girl no longer knows how to behave. She really wants him to leave as soon as possible, or even better, to go on some long business trip. When suddenly, he remembers that he was a little late in her salary, and since he now has the opportunity to correct this, he gives twice as much as he should. The girl asks why so much, because usually the amount was a little less. Of course, she doesn't mind, but still, it's better to clarify once again, so as not to fall into some kind of trap or test, which he really likes to arrange from time to time. The gentleman says that there is no catch in this, and since she does her job very well, he is ready to increase the remuneration and believes that she fully deserves it. Of course, she is very alarmed by such sudden gifts because most likely it definitely means something. He warned that you don't know at all that she needs to do more than usual. He just wants to give a little more than usual this time. The maid had never heard anything like that from him, and moreover did not receive more than she should have. She was very alarmed by this strange situation. Lately, he had become too kind, and for some reason only towards her. She really wants to ask what this means, but it's probably better not to do that. She can only thank her and hope that it will always be like this. In the end, the maid could not restrain herself and admitted that she sincerely does not understand why he treats her better than the others, because she has many more mistakes, and there are those who are more deserving of such bonuses. The gentleman replied that he didn't really want to answer this question, and if she asked him again, then next time he would certainly not make her happy, but someone else. The guy hinted that she really shouldn't ask unnecessary questions. If he does this, then it's right and it's not discussed. The girl replied that she understood everything and said that she would try to improve. She thanked him again and hinted that it was time to get back to work. In any case, she is not very upset because not everything is as bad as it could be. She believes that she needs to take advantage of his good attitude because it is unknown how long this will last. She has the opportunity to accumulate more than planned, and this don't please. After that, his look changed very much. It seems that sometimes he deliberately changes his mood very sharply and imperceptibly so that no one relaxes. The maid began to fold the dirty things and said that now it was definitely time for her to go. Otherwise, she would work until the morning and still wouldn't get anything done. She thanked him again and promised that she would try not to upset him, but, on the contrary, to do her job even better. Now she is thinking that finally he lets her go and does not ask her to stay. The girl began to think where to go, so that if suddenly he wants to talk again, so that he looks for her as long as possible. This man loves to control everything so much that when she went out into the corridor, he also came out and began to follow her with his eyes. Since she had the opportunity to leave, she began to speed up and pretend that she was in a hurry to do all the work, although in fact, she just wanted to get as far away from him as possible. As soon as she saw the first turn, she immediately turned to rest a little and calm down, since after every conversation, this takes a lot of time. The gentleman seems to take all the energy from her, and even after 5 minutes of conversation, she very often has the feeling that she doesn't even have the strength to walk and talk. It happened that a girl worked 7 days a week, but even then she was not as tired as from a small conversation with this person. At that moment, she wondered whether there was any point in inventing anything at all, because if she made even one mistake, she could consider everything lost. On the other hand, since he forgives a lot, she has hope that everything is possible and everything can be played out as if he misunderstood everything. As soon as evening came, a carriage arrived at the mansion, after which there was a guard who controlled that no one left or entered the territory. He constantly looks at the time and controls every second, because if someone is late, he will be personally responsible for it. His responsibility is to make sure that no one waits for anyone and is not late. When suddenly he sees that the maid is in a hurry somewhere and seems to want to tell him something. She apologized for delaying her, but explained that she needed to say something. The man did not say anything and simply decided to listen to her. He only slightly hinted that it was not customary to be late, and if she knew in advance that she wanted to tell him something, she should have arrived much earlier and not delayed anyone. It turns out that since they have known each other for a very long time, they have common topics. After the conversation, he asked how the girl was doing and if she had any problems. She replied that it wasn't that bad, but of course it could have been a lot better, like everyone else here. He said that this is very cool, because it is believed that if there are no serious problems here, then this is simply wonderful. Here it can be either terrible or acceptable and tolerable. And yet, he again reminded that next time, if she wants to see each other, it is better to take care of his time and her own, since this is much more serious than it seems. He has a huge responsibility and the risk of being punished. And it would be nice if everyone understood this and thought not only about themselves. It sounded a little rude, but that's how he just wanted to get the point across. The girl replied that she would try to improve and never do this again, although she thought that he could have said something softer about it. When suddenly the owner appears nearby. That assistant urgently needed to go somewhere, and it is not surprising if, in fact, he does this very often, just so as not to be near him. The maid turned in his direction and tried with all her might to pretend that he didn't scare her at all. She asked what his mood was today, because I found out that he really likes it when someone is interested in his well-being, after which the girl decided to find out what his plans are for today. After all, this is the only question with which you can find out where he will be and how long he will be absent in time, even if he thinks that she is really interested in this. But in fact, the girl is just trying to calculate her time. She realized that, judging by his clothes, he will have some very important meeting. After that, she wished him a good day and said that she would wait for his return. Although in fact, this was completely wrong. The girl would only be happy if he was kept as long as possible. Then he suddenly wanted to ask some question, and at that moment, she immediately tensed and thought that if he now asked to go with him, then the plan would immediately fail. She had already imagined different options and began to pray. If only she could now stay in this huge mansion without him for several hours. If this does not work out, everything will drag on for several days. For some reason, he begins to remain silent and does not ask anything. When too much time has passed and it became very awkward, the maid reminded him that he wanted to ask her something. It turns out that now he is very interested in whether she has ever been to the beach in her youth or as a child. The maid expected to hear anything, but not this. At that moment, in order to answer something, she began to remember the events that happened several years ago. It was the time when she had just gotten a job with him. Just then, he promised many times that he would often give her days off and vacation every 6 months. Then she dreamed about it, and when the time came to get this long-awaited vacation, he was constantly silent and said that everything would be. Then she did not yet know how cruel he was and was not even afraid to come up with complaints. Allegedly, he did not keep his promises. This went on for several years, and only at that moment, when he began to answer these questions very aggressively, did the maid understand that she would not have any vacation, no matter how much she reminded her about it. Since she had no experience, she thought that this person would change his mind, or that he was simply in a bad mood. Then she could not even think that she had fallen into a trap. And in fact, instead of begging for leave to go to the sea, I had to leave this job. She endured his screams, constantly waited for the promised vacation, and in general, did not even notice how every day her work no longer brought any pleasure. The girl stopped thinking about money. She just wanted to earn at least one day off to go home and just be alone. Instead, he constantly asked her to stay. And as a result, today the maid has not even left this territory for several years in a row. She managed to change, that even if she did this, she will regret it very much. Although the owner never forbade this, she just feels that it is better not to do this and is trying not to risk it. He very often promised a lot of things, but each time the girl believed his words less and less, she realized that she had fallen into a trap from which it was no longer possible to get out. When she got this job, it was the biggest mistake of her life, and now she can only come to terms with it. Every day she tried to find something good in her life, but she never found it. The salary did not justify all those moments that made her think about quitting. She looked at her gray room and wondered how her life could deteriorate so dramatically without her even noticing it. And that's not all. To all these shortcomings was added the fact that the owner could come to her room without warning. And even though she wants to rest or is busy, he starts talking to her on various topics and is not interested in whether she wants this. There was a situation when a girl didn't want to see anyone and heard that someone was approaching the door. She realized that she could not help but open it, much less drive this person away. She had to get out of bed, open the door, and meet him with a smile, like she's always happy to see him. She looked at him and asked how she could help. The guy, as usual, was simply silent for several minutes, kept the intrigue, and in the end admitted that he was just bored. She tried in every possible way to hint that now was not the best time. She looked tired, but this did not stop anyone. He clearly does not plan to leave and will ignore any hints. The girl got used to it and simply counted the minutes until he suddenly got bored and went back. It's impossible to imagine what it's like when a person is simply unbearable and wants to be alone. But instead, she has to pretend that she enjoys this conversation and the person she hates most in her life. Moreover, there was such a thing that he could ask for something that would take a very long time to complete, or just a very difficult task, and she had no right to even hint that she didn't really want to do it. All the staff knew one rule: you couldn't refuse the gentleman. He immediately perceives it as disrespect, and begins to get very angry. It seems that all his staff have been very guilty of something, and have been trying to make amends all these years. They do their job well, and sometimes even this is not enough. The girl thought more than once that perhaps he treats them this way only because he has never been in their place. He does not know what it is like to receive an impossible task and understand that even if it is impossible, he is obliged to do it, otherwise he will greatly regret it. The hardest part was when he started to behave in a way that seemed to hint at some kind of relationship. He often touched her face and said ambiguous phrases to confuse her. It is possible that he simply liked to watch her awkward reaction. The girl was constantly embarrassed and was afraid to even imagine what he was trying to hint or say. She was afraid to even think that one day he would stop hinting and he wouldn't even need her consent to anything. Even when he left and she didn't see him the whole day, there was still a feeling that even here there was no safety. She was not protected from anything. Even when nothing strange was happening, she still had the anticipation of something bad. A few hours ago, the owner was visiting the Grand Duke. He came to him on a very important matter and was very worried, since he does not see him often, and if this happens, then the reason is very serious. He is very worried, opens the door with trembling hands, and understands that he is leaving from here either very happy or very upset. It's very interesting what they will talk about, because most of their meetings were in a bad mood. Someone either didn't like something, or someone received new tasks. So far, he is even afraid to look this man in the eye. The guy lowers his head down, and he is very lucky that from the outside it looks like a sign of respect, and perhaps the man will perceive it that way. Instead of greeting each other, the man begins to remember the shortcomings and says that it is very strange that a person who was constantly late and was never punctual suddenly arrived on time and even a few minutes earlier, which is very surprising and unusual for him. Now it's clear why the guy was so worried, because it's simply impossible to have a calm conversation with this person. He constantly accuses him of something and is dissatisfied with something. The guy is afraid to say an extra word, and at this moment, he doesn't even realize that his staff feels exactly the same as he does now. The only person he is afraid of now is right in front of him. He is never in a good mood. And it is strange that the guy never compared himself with him and did not think that for someone, he is as rude and scary a person as this man for him. He doesn't even remember that there was such a situation, that they smiled or talked about something good. In this office, he listens to either criticism or a very serious accusation, to which most often he is not even involved and has nothing to do. When suddenly they started talking about some bride, which is very strange, only this is not a joyful conversation. Rather, on the contrary, one of them considers her very boring. Her name is Lady Ariella. It turns out that the man insisted that the guest marry her. And of course, since the guy has no right to refuse, he is forced to agree, although he really doesn't want it. He planned to think about any relationship no earlier than in a few years. He has no idea how to avoid this, so he had to leave with her in the same carriage. Now they don't even talk. And in fact, the girl feels great how he treats her. She even turned away and stopped looking in his direction. She understands that now he is not in any mood, and if she starts talking about something, especially regarding the wedding, it will only get worse. It's very interesting how she feels about this, because most likely, this was also not her personal desire. It's likely that she found herself in the same situation as him and can't do anything about it. As soon as some time had passed, he still asked her to tell her some information about himself. If, of course, the girl didn't mind talking. The lady did not refuse and said that she loves animals very much and hates spending time in noisy companies. She likes to cook and relax in a calm environment. She turned out to be much bolder than he expected. He did not think that the girl would be able to carry on a conversation so easily and would not be ashamed to tell some information about herself, like many others. And yet, it is interesting to find out what the point is in this relationship and what benefit there could be for each of the parties. Most likely, there's definitely one. On this day, they were offered a very interesting type of date. Everything was invented a few days ago, so that they did not have to waste time on this. That man prepared something interesting, where they actually went. A very pleasant evening awaits them, if, of course, they can still get used to each other and are not categorical. The organizers have prepared a small event. But unlike how it usually happens, here no one knows each other. People have to get to know each other, because it would be strange if everyone stood alone and did not talk to anyone. They invited the best chef here, who prepared special dishes that cannot be tasted in any ordinary restaurant. He did a very good job. Everything looks very appetizing. Among all these guests, they, the future newlyweds, are already sitting. They have ordered several dishes for themselves. It will be much easier to conduct a dialogue, and besides, the bad mood will instantly disappear after they try these culinary masterpieces. For now, they pretend that they really want to try something, and because of this, they cannot talk, although in fact, no one is hungry. This is just a way to calm down a little and get used to the situation. Then they started talking on different topics and did not notice how they stopped worrying and began to communicate, as if they had known each other for much longer than a few hours. When he recently said that he found her very boring, he could not even think that everything would not be as bad as he thought. He is quite pleased to be next to her. She has a very pleasant voice, and sometimes he even gets the feeling that he could go on a second date. Then he thought that it would be simply unbearable. Now it's the other way around. He does not deny that he sincerely wants to see her one more time. And this will not only be because someone is forcing him, he just wants to get to know this person better and understand what their future marriage will be like. As soon as they managed to find common themes and all the dishes were eaten to the last crumb, the guy asked to bring tea and several desserts. And of course, the meal went without saying that he couldn't keep silent about his character. The guy warned that if she did become his wife, it would be very difficult, since sometimes it's hard for him to control himself, and most often he's not in the mood. The girl said that she would try to get used to it, but she has no idea that everything is much more serious than it seems. She will have to face a completely different person, who is very different from how she sees him here and now. Now it seems to her that he is very worried and therefore tries to appear reserved and hardly smiles. But in fact, this is only a small part of his complex character. It's strange that while talking to her, he often remembers his assistant and sees something in common in them. It seems to him that they have a very similar voice, hair color, and something else, perhaps due to the fact that he has a slight sympathy for his assistant. Ariella also seemed quite cute, since she looks very much like her. He even had a small smile and a normal mood, since everything turned out even better than he expected. There was no tension in the conversation, and he really liked the food. Meanwhile, evening came. He managed to return home before midnight and, as usual, immediately went into his office to think everything over and understand what to do next. He has such mixed feelings that the guy no longer knows what will happen tomorrow and whether he even wants this wedding. Everything happened so unexpectedly that he even has a desire to refuse and not allow another person to control his life, because, in his opinion, only he can do this. The next day came. As soon as the gentleman woke up, he immediately thought about his assistant and decided that it would be nice to invite her and talk about something, how she would be freed from work, and perhaps a good mood would come. At least he thinks so. As soon as she walked in, he began asking a lot of questions regarding her mood and what she had already done today. In fact, he was not interested in any of this. He just decided to start this conversation in such a way as to quietly approach what he wanted to do. Why did he really call her? Initially, she thought that his office needed to be cleaned up, and that's why he called her so early. She brought with her a bucket of water and all the necessary supplies, but it seems that she won't need any of this. The gentleman asks why she took all this, to which the maid replied that she thought that since the working day was not over yet, he invited her on business. In response, he laughed and said that she was very mistaken. And in fact, the reason for this meeting was completely different. He didn't even know how to say it correctly, although the girl already understood everything. She looked into his eyes and imagined with horror what awaits her now. He looks at her like this almost always when he wants to close the door and ask others not to come up to him or disturb him in the near future. Everything is perfectly clear here. As usual, he asks her to come closer, smile, and say some nice words. The girl does this through her strength, and at the same time, realizes that this is just the beginning. She tries to come up with different nice words, since every time he asks not to use the same ones. His look begins to change as soon as she gets close. The guy asks if she knows why he called her, because perhaps there are some assumptions. He was very interested to hear this. The maid barely tries to hide her fear and answers that she has no ideas. The gentleman continues to hint that he wants to spend time with her and make sure that each of them is satisfied. He begins to smile as if he understands perfectly well that everything is already clear here. Only now the girl no longer has the opportunity to resist, since all the staff are somewhere on the street and no one can come to the rescue. And if she tried to hint that she didn't like something, it would only make things worse. That's exactly what she was afraid of. The girl tried to come up with something and said that she still needed to clean up a little. She climbed onto the table and began to wipe the dust from the chandelier. She had such a reaction as if she was really very afraid of him and no longer knew what to do for him to leave her alone. At this time, he sits calmly on his chair, smiles and thinks that she won't succeed anyway. Since he has something in mind, it should come true in any case. He already has different thoughts about what can be done so that it is not too cruel, but at the same time, to do what he wanted and why he called her. He begins to get that same look that usually happens in situations where something terrible is about to happen. He begins to look at her, examines the dress, and again hints that no matter how she tries to delay time, he will still get his. As soon as she went down to the floor, she tried to pretend as if she didn't understand anything. The girl began to look for other places, since there was still no other option. She will have to take as long as she can. She will have to wait until the staff returns and can hear her screams. The maid had never been in such a difficult situation and did not think that this would happen today. She really hoped that it would be a very calm day and she would be able to take a break from everything that happened earlier. But as usually happens, every day is worse than the previous one. She again thought about it, to talk seriously with him and hint that she did not like such conditions and that she was thinking about changing jobs. She already does more than she should. At the same time, every day she risks her safety, and not only, most likely, someday she will definitely get tired of all this and she will decide to have this conversation. We can only hope that this happens as soon as possible. Here you need to either take risks or resign yourself and remain in such conditions for the rest of your life. Because if you just imagine how everything can change, if suddenly everything works out for her and she can leave here, this will be a completely new stage. The girl will enjoy every moment and the opportunity to be safe. She is very upset to realize that other people have all this, but she can only dream of what is usually the norm. If suddenly there will be a day when she will not hear his voice, will not be afraid of him, and even better, if there is a huge distance or even several cities between them, she will be the happiest person in the world. But unfortunately for now, these are just dreams. And now she is in the office, where anything can happen at any moment. Most likely, the rest of the staff have the same dreams. It's unlikely that anyone likes working here and feeling like they're in some kind of trap from where there will never be a way out. The maid is already so tired of all this that even now she can barely restrain herself from saying everything she thinks about him and trying to escape. She hates this terrible look and would do anything to forget this man forever and leave the territory of this hellish mansion, where there have never been and never will be happy people. Being here, even the owner rarely smiles and can punish anyone for no reason. This has become the norm, although before she had no idea that she needed to run far away from him, unless, of course, she wanted to go on with her life and feel freedom. It seems like he's doing everything he can to make as many people as possible hate him. He doesn't seem to notice that everyone is trying to do as much work as possible and please him. He takes it for granted, and when someone does not live up to his expectations, or if suddenly he sees someone with nothing to do, he really likes not only to punish, but also to add more things to do so that no one has time to rest. It turns out to be a vicious circle. People do not have time to rest from the usual amount of their work. When they have a free minute and he notices this, there are more and more tasks, which is very unfair and wrong on his part. As soon as the girl again tried to hint that she had a lot to do and it was time to go, He asked her to stop and said that he would not let her go, and she would not be able to leave so easily. At this moment, hatred for this person increased to infinity. She was already tired of feeling helpless and not being able to refuse him. It seems as if he likes to see frightened assistants who are afraid to answer him something, as if he is observing how much they can withstand and how much their patience will last. And that's not all. The owner says that until he sees a smile on her face, she definitely won't go anywhere and can stay here even until the evening. Apparently, he is in such a bad mood today that literally everyone he sees or remembers will be punished for no reason. At one point, he pushed her so hard that the maid almost lost consciousness. She hit herself hard and did not understand why he was treating her like that. She has never done anything bad for him. Every day she does several times more than she should, and she also endures such unbearable conversations almost every day. The girl could not restrain herself and began to cry. She knows that the gentleman does not like to see tears, but she cried anyway. She could not contain her emotions because this was too much. And the worst thing is that she can't even say anything, answer or look at him so that he understands everything and apologizes. This will never happen. The situation is so hopeless that tears appear by themselves. They cannot be controlled. In fact, like hatred for this man. He did enough for the maid to consider him an enemy and dream of escaping. It's impossible to believe that this is not all that could be. She saw with her own eyes how he mocks others and leaves in a good mood. He is a real monster, with whom it is impossible to be. Even for a few minutes, he brings misfortune and problems to everyone who knows him. After everything that just happened, he begins to carefully wipe away her tears. This makes her even more disgusted and wants to push him away as much as he just did. She was once again convinced that his mood changes every second. At first, he can hate and hurt someone, and after a few minutes, he can carefully wipe the tears from his face. This is simply terrible, and this happens literally almost every day, but not always in relation to her, since there are other assistants whom he also does not ignore. We can only hope that this is all. The torment is over, and soon she will finally be able to leave this office. During all this time, the girl has so improved her ability to endure absolutely everything that is possible that nothing is impossible for her. She even learned to hide her emotions and fight the desire to hit someone hard. Is it really true that he himself doesn't think that if he treats his assistants this way, sooner or later they might take revenge on him, or at least think about it? In such conditions, when they cannot say what they do not like or are not satisfied with, sooner or later this will definitely happen, and no one will be afraid anymore. Because patience is not eternal, it ends someday. Only some people have very little of it, while others have enough, and sometimes, unfortunately, someone's life depends on it. The strangest thing you can notice about his behavior is that, at first he can be very cruel, and literally after a few seconds, he hugs someone and acts as if nothing happened. Moreover, the girl has long noticed that he calls her to him more often than anyone else. Other assistants are in this office much less often than she is, and this is very unfair. Is it really just because he thinks she's prettier than the others that she has to endure a lot more than others? At some point, as soon as he wanted to kiss her, which she was definitely not ready for, the girl dared and did not let him do it. She understands that she is taking a big risk, but she definitely will not allow him to do this. She warned him more than once that there was only a working relationship between them and nothing more. Therefore, she has the right to remind him of this or stop him in such situations. Without thinking twice, he takes her in his arms and without saying a single word, begins to take her somewhere. The girl did not comment on this somehow, because she had already done more than she could. He throws her on the floor and tells her to never do that again, because here he is the master, not she. This time the guy warned that now he won't do anything to her, but if this situation happens again and she dares to touch him without permission, she will regret it very much. In fact, the maid did not regret anything. Sometimes she really wants to do what is forbidden. Besides, she knows very well that he will not punish her as much as the others. No matter how hard he tries to look very rude and strong, it is already clear that he is like this only in relation to others, and he constantly forgives her and does not admit for what reason. As soon as she was able to get up a little, the girl asked when she could start work, because a lot of time had already passed, and no one would do anything instead of her. The guy replied that if she really wanted to do something, then she could start from this room and do a general cleaning of the entire mansion, for which he gave time until night. The girl regretted saying this phrase out loud, because now she has even more tasks than she had before that moment. She begins to beg to reschedule it for tomorrow, because today she doesn't even have time to do what she planned for today. The gentleman replied that usually his orders are not discussed, but today he will make an exception for her. And then suddenly, he decided to ask what time was convenient for her to visit him tomorrow morning. With this, he completely ruined her mood and made it so that there was no longer even hope for a good tomorrow.